Marin Magat, thank you so much for joining us here at the Storytelling by and for Adult series on Monday, November 7, 2022. Please tell us a little about yourself and your work, and tell us where you're telling from, and please tell us a story.
Wonderful, Eric. Thank you. I'm here with my son Bernard, and I have another daughter named Wesley. Bernard is 9 and my daughter is almost 12. We live in the state of Maine, which is the most northeast part of the United States, just up against Canada. Maine is only about 1 million people, and so it's has a lot of natural wonders. It's open fields and rivers and lakes, and our house is only a couple miles from the ocean, and there's a lot of sets of islands out there. So it's very picturesque. It's a wonderful place to be. So this story is called The Fox and the Rabbit. There's a story, right, Bernard? And inside the story, there is a smaller story. And inside the smaller story, there was a box. And inside the box, there was a broken story, which I am telling you right now. Fox went out on a chilly night, prayed to the moon to give him light. He had many a mile to go that night before he reached the town. No, town, no, town, no, many a mile to go that night before he reached the town. No. This was a song that was sung at my school growing up, and it was collected by Pete Seeger, who is a folk singer here in the United States. And it turns out it's very old. It's almost 500 years old, which is old in English. I know it's not old in India. And I always loved this story as a child. I love that there's a fox family in it and there's danger. But I also love something about it that's like the story below the story, something that's not articulated, something I just feel. He ran till he came to a great big bin. The ducks and the geese were kept therein. Said, a couple of you gonna grease my chin before I leave this town. No, town, no, town, no. A couple of you gonna grease my chin before I leave this town. No. So I was driving back from dropping Bernard off at school, and I saw a flash of, it was a flash of gray and rust on the side of the road. And I got off the exit of the highway and circled back around, and sure enough, it was a young fox. It almost made it all the way across, and had been hit in the flank and was bloodied there, and its mouth was caught in a snarl. It's such a strange thing. A year ago, I was in a writing group hosted by Laura Sims, who Eric knows and many of you do as well. And you'll remember that the Ukrainian war had started as well, the war in Ukraine. And my ancestors are from there. And I was feeling wanting it to understand them deeper, their journey, and their trade was one way I could do that. They were furriers, and they made, out of the furs of wild animals, they made collars and coats. And that was later how my great-grandmother, who I was close with, raised her 2 boys in pre-World War II Paris. And I wrote, as I was writing, that I desired the fur of our rabbit, Chi-Chi. And Chi-Chi is a wonderful, wonderful being. She's a German Angora rabbit, so she's huge, and she has the softest fur, and she is just so full of love. She greets us, each of us, at her cage, as only animals can. So I was confused. I was confused by this message and this desire. He grabbed the gray goose by the neck, threw the little one over his back. He didn't mind the quack, 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 and the legs all dangling down, no, down, no, down, no, no. He didn't mind the quack, 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 the legs all dangling down, no. So I took that fox and I put it in a LL Bean bag. These are made here in Maine, and I put it in my trunk and I took it home. But I didn't do it in that order. I actually sat with the spirit of this fox and with its body, and I felt in that moment how much bigger the spirit of a fox is than the physical being that it's caught in. It was quite a touching experience, and it gave me somewhat of a permission to do what I did next. I carried that fox behind our house, through our yard, past Chi-Chi's cage. I love you, Chi-Chi girl. Puts up her ears. Back into the woods behind our house. And I'd sharpened my knife and I cut carefully and stripped the fur from that fox's body. I had burned sweetgrass and juniper as a way to cleanse myself and the spirit of the fox. And if anybody has ever done it, it's you pull. It's a lot like Saran wrap. The fur itself comes right off. It's not a bloody or gross thing. It's actually quite intimate in some ways, except for the flies. And there weren't flies because of what I was doing, but because of the blood on the leg of the fox. They were attracted to the scene, and there were just a couple at first, and then they were more, and they were really big, and they buzzed inside the plastic bag I had put around the fox before I put it in the LL Bean bag. And it was, the sound of them was filling me and overwhelming, and I just had to keep cutting and keep focusing, and I buried the body and I finished what I was doing, and I nailed the fox pelt up on a fence and walked back. Hi, Chi-Chi girl. Love you. Oh, mother pitter patter jumped out of bed. Out of the window she popped her head, crying, John, John, the gray goose is gone, and the fox is on the town. No, town, no, town, no. John, John, the gray goose is gone, and the fox is on the town. No. Within 3 days, Chi-Chi was dead. We had a big windstorm here. It was big warm rain. Our basement almost flooded. The lights turned off. But she was inside her cage. She had a covering. She greeted us afterwards. There shouldn't have been. There didn't seem to be anything wrong. There were no signs. But she was gone the next day. Everything after a storm is quiet, and so was her cage. It could have been many things. It could have been the stress of the storm and the wind. It could have been something about how we'd missed her care. It could have been as we looked online that flies can lay their eggs in an animal's fur. You never even know, and within 24 hours the animal, the rabbit, can die. We'll never know. We'll never know why. We put her in a cedar box. A neighbor brought roses. A farmer friend brought the tops of carrots, which she really, really loved to eat. And we held her soft being and body, and we said goodbye. John, he went to the top of the hill, blew his horn both loud and shrill. The foxy said, I better flee with my kill. They'll soon be on my trail. Oh, trail, oh, trail, oh. The foxy said, I better flee with my kill. They'll soon be on my trail. Oh. So what is the relationship between a predator and a prey? It's something that as human beings we may never understand. Is there some kind of intimacy where the fate of one is linked to the fate of another? I was told by a friend that death is a period at the end of a sentence. And then the sentence continues. And grief is how our heart opens to love, to being here. He went till he came to his cozy den. There were his little ones, 8, 9, 10. Crying, Daddy, Daddy, don't you go back again? Must be a mighty fine town, no, town, no, town, no. Daddy, Daddy, don't you go back again? Must be a mighty fine town, no. So there was one other activity happening over this week. One of my best friends had moved to Washington State, which is on the opposite coast of Maine. And she had asked all her friends to put together a ceremony to invite a child into her life so that she could become pregnant. And so I gathered all our friends from Maine as well, and we talked to the friends in Washington, and we sent blessings and pieces for the ritual space. And she sent back a photograph at the end of the weekend while we were in this deep grief of her just surrounded by other women in the ferns in the woods with her hands on her belly, ready. I was so strange, right? So strange, all of this happening at the same time. And through it, I realized that that fox pelt, it didn't want to stay in our house. It wanted to go to that little new baby, the one to come. The softness of it, perhaps something about this story. Certainly, the memory of our wonderful, soft, and loving rabbit. May her memory be a blessing, and may she surround this child spirit who is to come. The fox and his wife without any strife cut the goose with a fork and a knife. Oh, they never had such a supper in their life. And the little ones chewed on the bones, oh, bones, oh, bones, oh, no, they never had such a supper in their life. The little ones chewed on the bones, oh. That is the story as far as I know. Now, let us chew on the bones, oh.
Okay, thank you very much. Gustavo?
Well, sorry, animal stories are very strong to me. And those little things that in life bring about, those little things are very important. And thank you. Mixing song with that story was very, very nice. And yes, some stories are only oral and personal, and that's your story. It's personal. Each of them can have one story like that. So thank you.
So it seemed there might be some kind of connection between the fox passing away and the rabbit passing away. But it's a mystery, right? Is your mic still on, Marin?
Yes, I just turned it off while Bernard was here. It feels like a mystery that's unsolved, right? And that's what I was referring to towards the end, that there's some intimacy between a predator and a prey, and that there's a very, very small chance that the flies were involved. It's just such a strange. It was so strange that all of this is happening at the same time, and I think that's somewhat of what life is like, right? We follow our path and we love our friends and we experience grief, and it all comes in one strange package. And this was my attempt to make sense of that. Eric, you challenged me to actually tell a story about my experience. So this was the story, yeah.
And did all of this happen kind of recently, right?
Yes, yes, a month ago, right.
And so what did you do with the fox pelt?
So I've been curing it and scraping it and getting it ready to send to my friend. Yeah, don't tell the secret.
You're going to send it to Washington?
Yeah.
And I'm almost afraid to ask, but what about the rabbit fur? Are you doing anything with that?
Right. I forgot to include that in the story. that we buried her with her fur, because that was a part of who she was.
Mhm.
So even though I had that strange kind of desire, almost like it was almost selfish. It was so strange. It was just greed. It was almost like a greed I didn't understand. So, but she's the kind of rabbit where she's a working animal, meaning that her fur is actually used for knitting and sweaters and things like that. And so we had to shave her every couple months. And so we have a lot of her fur left. And so she will be very much present with us. I would like to make something really, really meaningful and deep and warm for both of my children, just to have their whole lives that they can feel her presence. Yeah.
Mhm. My father's father, who was the only grandparent I knew, was a furrier. And when I was a child, he was working, and he told us all about he was a cutter of the furs, not a stitcher. There was a whole different departments between cutting and stitching. He was a cutter, and he was very proud that he was able to cut in such a way that nothing was wasted, and that pieces could be fit together and used in a very economical way.
I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I think there is a relationship, right, between people who are working with the animal and appreciating what they've offered, and that there's so much waste now, and we live in Maine, as I said, and there's a lot of industry around fishing, and there's so many kinds of fish and other animals taken out of the ocean at one time, and then they are just put in these big bins, and some is used, but a lot of it just smells and goes to waste, and it feels so disrespectful. So I love that you brought that in, Eric, and that kind of feeds my soul.
He was proud of it. And he was from Russia, and came from Russia to the USA in the early years of the 1900s. And in New York, throughout, I guess, up into through the 40s and 50s, the fur business was a big part of the garment industry.
Yeah.
From the 60s onward, it really dwindled, and now it's a very small part. But the fur business was so big, and of course, furs, trapping animals for fur, and dealing with the fur is such a big part of the history of Maine, and a big part of the history of Canada.
Yeah, we don't have to get into the fashion of beaver hats right now, but that's a really interesting story behind the story, right? June, do you know that story? Yeah. Anyway, I so appreciate everyone's love and attention, and Gustavo, I'm so glad the music worked. Yeah.
June?
Marin, A Fox Went Out on a Chilly Night is one of my favorite songs by Pete Seeger. I sang it to my children and my grandchildren. And your story reminded me of a nursery rhyme as a child. Bye, baby bunting, daddy's gone a hunting to catch a little rabbit skin to wrap the little baby in. And with you with the baby at the end, that just popped into my mind. It was a great story.
I love that. I'm gonna send that to my friend when I send her the pellet. That's a wonderful, thank you.
You're welcome.
In many traditional cultures, there's a devotional and ritual process that the hunters go through before they hunt, where they do, at least in India, they do a puja, and consider the animal that they're hunting for, and ask the animal to be available, and thank the animal for giving its life. So there's a proper ceremony that they do before hunting.
It's very intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot that enters in that I think is kind of undescribable in the relationship about life and the life cycle, and whatever we believe about what creates that and holds that space for us.
Mhm.
It's very stirring.
All right, well, thank you. That put us
Mhm.
in a different space.
It's great to be here.
Anybody else want to add anything? No. Okay, great. Thank you.